Let's look at some common misunderstandings of the doctrine of the Trinity. And each one of these misunderstandings is based on denying one of the following three propositions. We've already made these claims. We've said that, first, there is only one God. Secondly, we have said that there are three divine persons. And thirdly, we have said that each of these three persons are equal to the other in their essence. So when a belief system denies or minimizes one of those three, that's where you get into heresy. So I think this diagram will help you. If we affirm that there is one God and three persons, then we've really summarized the doctrine of subordinationism. It's also known as Arianism. So Arianism affirms two of those three affirmations. There is one God, there are three persons, but Arianism denies that those three persons are equal to one another. According to Arianism, Christ is subordinate to the Father, not just in his role, which would be okay to say that Christ in his role is subordinate to the Father, but Arius taught that Christ in his nature is below the Father, is subordinate to the Father. In fact, Christ is a creation of the Father. Christ is not eternal, but is a creation of the Father. Arianism continues today in a group that you're probably familiar with, the Jehovah's Witnesses. The Jehovah's Witnesses essentially teach Arianism when it comes to Christ. So God the Father created Jesus Christ the Son at some point in time, so that Christ is not God in the sense of capital G God, but is a higher angel or a lower God, but he is subordinate to the Father. And subordinationism, Arianism, has been rejected by the church as a heresy. Now, a second misunderstanding or heresy regarding the Trinity is known as modalism. And modalism also affirms two of those three statements that we referenced a minute ago. Modalism affirms that there is one God, and modalism affirms that this one God manifests himself in three different ways, and each of those three ways are equal. But modalism denies that the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are three distinct persons within God. So rather than the Father, the Son, and the Spirit being three distinct persons within God, they are simply three different modes that God, or roles that God functions in. You think of yourself, you are one person, but you play different roles. I am a husband, I am a son, I am a dean. Right? Now, those are not three different persons. Those are simply three different roles or modes of being that I engage in. So in the same way, modalists say that God made himself, was in the mode of the Father during most of the Old Testament. And then for 33 years, he was in the mode of Jesus. And then after Jesus, he is in the mode of the Holy Spirit. So these are just three different roles or manifestations of the one God. Now, the good thing about modalism is it's really easy to understand, right? It removes all of that incomprehensibility stuff. And it really allows you, what it does is it reduces, going back to the Augustine story, it reduces the ocean to, just a bucket, a little barrel. So now I can fit all the water into my hole. It's easy to understand. The problem is that that's not what the biblical material points to. Going back to the baptism of Jesus, what do you do with those occasions, those multiple occasions, when the Father, the Son, and the Spirit are all acting at the same time? Where you have the Spirit descending upon the Son, the Father speaking from heaven. It's very clearly not three different modes, unless, God has some severe psychological problems and he is speaking to himself and answering himself and so on. So the church has rejected modalism as a heresy. Another heresy would be Tri-theism, a belief in three gods. So here, Tri-theism would affirm that there are three persons, three divine persons, that these three divine persons are equal to one another, but they would deny the oneness of God. There's such an emphasis on the persons that they actually become three gods. Tritheism is not as popular, I guess, as a heresy as Arianism and Modalism would be. Perhaps the one group or teaching that comes close to being tritheist would be Mormonism, where there is a belief in multiple gods. Now, another heresy is Unitarianism, sometimes also called adoptionism. And Unitarianism simply says that there is one God. Jesus Christ is not God. So the Father is God. Jesus Christ is not God. He is a great teacher. He is a great prophet. He is the Son of God by adoption. So God looks down upon the world and he sees Jesus, and this is very, I'm putting this in simplistic terms, but it's like God saying, if I did have a son, Jesus is the closest human being to what that would look like. Jesus is living in fellowship and communion with me more than any other human being has ever done. So I will adopt him as my son and use him as kind of like a teacher and an example of what it means to follow God. So Unitarianism denies the Trinity, denies the doctrine of the Trinity, doesn't really seek to explain the doctrine of the Trinity in some other way, as Arianism does or Modalism does, but actually just completely denies the doctrine of the Trinity. So there is the one God. Jesus Christ is not God. He's just a great teacher. The Holy Spirit is not a separate person. The Holy Spirit, that's just another way of talking about the one God who is at work within the world. The Holy Spirit is kind of God present with us, or God working in our midst, but not a separate person from God the Father. And then one final heresy, which again is not very prevalent, known as partialism, which is to say that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are each a part of God. So rather than saying the Father is fully God, the Son is fully God, the Holy Spirit is fully God, it's the Father plus the Son plus the Spirit equals God, which is to then minimize the divine nature of each of these persons.